Iran and the United States are holding high-stakes second round of negotiations in Rome over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are negotiating indirectly through mediators from Oman a week after a first round in Muscat that both sides described as constructive. Trump has imposed new sanctions on Iran as part of his maximum pressure campaign targeting the country. He has repeatedly suggested military action against Iran remained a possibility, while emphasizing he still believed a new deal could be reached by writing a letter to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to jumpstart these talks. Khamenei has warned Iran would respond to any attack with an attack of its own. Araghchi arrived this morning in Rome to attend the second round of the talks, on the eve of which he said Iran believes reaching an agreement on its nuclear program with the US is possible as long as Washington is realistic.
We are only engaged in indirect talks with the US side, and the reason for this is clear. Because of the threats by the US administration, because of the economic pressure by the US administration, and because of the maximum pressure regime that has been imposed on us, we cannot enter into direct negotiations with them. We have seen a certain level of seriousness in the first round of talks, and if they are ready to discuss the nuclear issue without involving other matters, then we can progress further towards a constructive dialogue.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has asserted that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, warning Iran of potential military action if no deal is reached.
I'm for stopping Iran, very simply, from having a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. I want Iran to be great and prosperous and terrific. I stopped them once they were broke and they didn't have any money for Hamas. They didn't have any money for Hezbollah. There wouldn't have been an October 7th disaster. They were broke. They had no money, and they weren't spending it to terrorist organizations because they had none.
Iran has time and again reiterated that their nuclear program is peaceful, but the West says is aimed at building an atomic bomb. And ahead of the talks, Iran's Araghchi met Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Later, in a joint press conference, Lavrov said that Russia is ready to assist in any way acceptable to both Tehran and Washington.
We are ready to help and mediate, to play any role that will be helpful from the Iranian point of view and acceptable for the United States. We proceed from the fact that the only way to get an agreement, as the minister has just said, is to agree exclusively on nuclear issues.
All right, DD India's Shubhendu Ghosh joins us with more from Delhi. Hi, Shubhendu. A very good afternoon. Donald Trump apparently dispatched a letter to Khamenei on March 5th, in which he said, I've written them a letter saying, I hope you're going to negotiate, because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing. He was clearly saying that either come to terms or get ready for the action. What can we expect here in the second round of talks?
That's right, Siddharth. Good afternoon. Donald Trump, in fact, has made that statement through that letter, and in his press statements made that amply clear that there is a certain maximalist approach that he's taking as far as the talks with Iran are concerned. It is going to be either talks or bombing, the two extremes that the US president talks about. Now, these are complex talks that are taking place, the second round of which are underway as we speak in Rome. Sources inform us these are indirect talks. Oman authorities, Oman foreign minister has also reached Rome. Oman is playing a mediator between Iran and United States. These are two countries, remember, who are not friends, who haven't had any diplomatic exchange for decades since the 1979 Iran revolution. Don't have embassies in each other's countries. Such adversaries are talking to find out a solution towards Iran's nuclear ambitions is going to be crucial. Iran, on the other hand, also has made it very clear that it does not intend to make a nuclear bomb as West and America allege all the time. It says that its nuclear enrichment is for civilian use, is for peaceful use. It has even accepted the intervention of the UN nuclear watchdog, IAEA. Its chief, Rafael Grossi, in fact, was in Tehran a couple of days back going through the various nuclear infrastructure of Iran. So it is willing to be monitored, but it is not willing to be dictated, and it is definitely not willing to negotiate under the threat of bombing. So in that sense, the talks are taking place under tremendous pressure because the stakes are very high. What happens in these talks are going to determine if West Asia, Middle East is going to be plunged in another cycle of conflict and violence. And therefore, what comes out of this second round of talks is hugely crucial.
Indeed, indeed. And, Shubhendu, there are indirect negotiations taking place with Oman as mediator. Would that bring any conclusion to these talks, keeping in concern the first round talks like you've just mentioned?
The fact that there is a mediation, there is not a direct conversation.
Yeah.
Remember, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi and Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's direct envoy to West Asia, are engaging in this in these interactions. They're representing the two sides. But Oman, being the mediator, Oman has traditionally, in the past decade, since the talks and relations broke down between the US and Iran, has played mediator more than once. So there is a hope that Oman could play that role well. There is a lot that is riding on these talks. As I mentioned earlier, that Donald Trump ideally would not want to engage in another conflict. He is already busy in ending conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza.
Yeah,
he wouldn't like to initiate another one. On the other hand, Iran cannot afford to be get into a direct conflict with the United States. It already has had a setback with Israel recently in the context of the Gaza conflict. So in that sense, a mediation by Oman makes the whole interaction complicated. But how much are the two sides willing to really climb down from their maximalist positions? Because Donald Trump, America would ideally want that the complete dismantling of the Iranian nuclear infrastructure happens. Not just that, it is also hoping to end Iran's progress in ballistic missile technology, something that Iran in the recent weeks and months we know has very proudly showcased its underground facilities to be able to launch ballistic missiles. So America is hoping to achieve more and more. Its partner in the region, Israel, would have ideally preferred to perhaps bomb the nuclear sites first and then get into a negotiation. So Israel is also nervously watching what comes out of this conversation. Therefore, any headway, any breakthrough is going to have tremendous repercussions for both the nations.
Definitely a crucial moment as far as the nuclear talks are concerned. But Shubhendu, can you tell us about where does the Iran's nuclear program stands as of now?
Well, it is, there are different sources that inform. If we look at the manner in which IAEA has reported on Iran's nuclear potential, Iran, for example, has maintained that all its progress in nuclear technology is aimed at civilian use for peaceful purposes. A bit of technicality here, that for peaceful use you need a certain degree of refined uranium. Just above 3% is good enough for peaceful civilian use of nuclear energy in agriculture, in medicine, and of course production of energy, which is the most common use of nuclear power. To be able to make a bomb, you need a highly refined uranium, the raw material for a nuclear bomb. About 90% refinement, enrichment of uranium is required. Now, IAEA has reported that Iran has achieved up to 60% enrichment, especially in its facility Natanz, which is the key enrichment facility for Iran. And it has warned that such high degree of enrichment could in fact give Iran the possibility of, in fact, if it goes on like this, in a few weeks it could in fact be ready with its first bomb, and about upwards of 200 kilogram of enriched uranium could in fact enable Iran in a year's time to have about half a dozen nuclear bombs. So those again are the reasons why it is very important for America to directly negotiate with Iran. Remember the agreement that Donald Trump had walked out of in 2018. He had said that it gives a lot of leeway to Iran to engage and indulge in its nuclear adventure. But here on the negotiating table, America would want to bring in maximum damage and push back Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran, on the other side, would also like to remember the statement that came in from the foreign minister when he said that how much we enrich uranium is not negotiable. It is for Iran to decide. What we can say is that we're not making a bomb. So in that sense, those conflicting statements are also adding a degree of complexity into the negotiation.
All right, we leave it there, Shubhendu. Thank you so much for your analysis.